I'm Adobe Certified Instructor Jeff Witchel, and this is Adobe Illustrator Tips and Tricks. Today's tutorial is titled Illustrator's Powerhouse Panel. In this tutorial, I'll be exploring the most powerful panel in all of Illustrator, the Appearance panel, which controls everything about the look of a selected object. It's kind of like a layers panel of an object, containing the stacking order of the parts of an object and what makes up the look of those parts. So, like the layers panel, if I wanted, I could click and drag my stroke and put it underneath my fill. Let me drag it back up. I can also turn on or off various attributes just by simply clicking the visibility eye to the left of the listing. So if I click the visibility eye next to the stroke, I can't see the stroke. Let me turn it back on by clicking the visibility eye again. Also, within the panel, I can select a part of the object, like for instance the stroke, and add an effect to just the stroke. Let me go to Distort and Transform and go to Zigzag and hit Preview. Not a very good zigzag, so let me increase the ridges per segment to make it more interesting. Now that's cool. Let me click OK. I can actually add multiple effects to just the stroke. Let me click the little disclosure arrow next to stroke to show you that zigzag is already there. And I'm going to go back under my FX pop-up to Distort and Transform. How about Pucker and Bloat? And I'm going to hit Preview, and I'm going to bloat it just a bit. Well, kind of hard to see what's going on, but let me click OK, and I'll change the stroke weight. I'm going to make it much thinner so we can see that it is adding zigzag and then pucker and bloat. And I can change right here in the panel the order in which the effects are being applied. Maybe I want pucker and bloat to be applied before zigzag. I can actually click on that pucker and bloat listing and drag it above zigzag so it gets applied before the zigzag. And because everything in this panel is non-destructive, you can change it at any time. So if I'm not happy with pucker and bloat, I can click on the listing and make it more, let's say, bloated. Let me hit Preview. And OK. Or at some point, if I decide I don't like the pucker and bloat, I can click on the listing and then click on the trash at the bottom of the panel. And I'm back to just my zigzag. Let me increase the weight of my stroke just a bit. Let me go to 20 points. But the best thing about the Appearance panel is it allows you to do the impossible. What if I wanted more than one stroke or fill in my object? Well, I could just click on the stroke listing and go over the new icon down the bottom of the Appearance panel. You can see it says Duplicate Selected Item. Let me click on that. So now I have two strokes. But I can't see the bottom stroke because it's being covered by the top stroke. Let me change the weight. I'm going to go to, how about 40 points? And then I need to change the color or I can't see the top stroke. And I can actually add even more strokes to this object. Let me click on my bottom stroke, and I'm going to click on Duplicate Selected Item, and I'll make my bottom stroke now 60 points, and I'll change the color in the swatches pop-up to red, and that is pretty cool. And I can also, at any point, apply this look to any other object. If I click on the little thumbnail at the top of the Appearance panel, that thumbnail contains the entire appearance of this selected object. And I can click and drag it to another unselected object to duplicate that look. But let me go to my next artboard, and we'll continue doing things that are impossible. Have you ever tried to apply a gradient to your type? Let me select my type. I'm going to double click on characters to select the characters within the type object. Click on the little pop-up swatches panel. I can apply a gradient. Let me do that. And you can see here in the tools panel, the fill has a gradient that's been added to it. But if I click off of the object, the gradient has never been added to the selected type. You can't do it in Illustrator. Unless, of course, you're using the appearance panel. I'm going to select my type again, and in the fill listing, I'm going to do something that makes no sense at first. I'm going to click None for the fill. So now, if I go back to my type listing, you can see there's no fill and no stroke. But what I can do is use a secret backdoor to add a new fill, not to the selected characters, but to the type object itself. And you can see now I have a black fill applied to my type. Let me go to my swatches panel pop-up, and I'm going to apply a gradient, and it works because you can apply a gradient to any object. In this case, I'm applying it to the type object, not to the selected characters. Why don't we try one more impossible thing to do in Illustrator? I'm going to double click on artboard number 3, and another thing is people will try to add a stroke to selected type. Let me double click on my characters, and I'm just going to add a stroke. Go to my stroke listing, go to the stroke swatches pop-up, and add a red stroke, and increase the weight of that stroke. How about 8 points? And you can see right away that there's a problem. Because half of the stroke is inside of the path and half of it is outside, the part that's to the inside is actually covering the letter forms. Not a very pretty sight. Well, you would think I could go to the characters and drag the stroke underneath the fill, and it looks like it's going to work. But it doesn't. It just doesn't work with editable type. Unless, of course, you use that same backdoor trick that I used earlier. Let me select my type and get rid of my stroke by going to the swatches pop-up and selecting None, and then also go to the fill and go to the swatches pop-up and select None. So now I have a type object that has no appearance. There's been nothing added to the characters of this type. But watch what happens if I go to my type object at the top of the appearance panel and go under my options menu to New Fill, and it also added a stroke of None to the type object itself, not to the selected type. And I'm going to add a red stroke and make that stroke thicker. And you can see it is covering the letter forms. But because the stroke has been added to the type object itself and not the characters, I can click on this stroke and drag it underneath the fill. So now it's not in front of the letter forms and really messing up the type. So this is an excellent solution for typographically correct strokes. Well, that's about it for today. Make sure to stay tuned for more Adobe Illustrator tips and tricks.